Genesis 24, the New King James Version. I'm going to read verses 1 through 8, and then I'm going to read verses 59 through 67, because this is a story about Isaac and the choosing of his wife. And I'm not going to stay here. I just want to touch on this to make a point, and they're going to move into another story that is the crux of my message. Starting in verse 1 of Genesis 24, New King James Version. Now Abraham was old, he was well advanced in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. So Abraham said to the oldest servant of his house, who ruled over all that he had, "Please put your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of the earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell, but you must go to my country and to my family and take a wife for my son Isaac." And the servant said to him, "Perhaps the woman would not be willing to follow me back to this land. Must I take your son back to the land from which you came?" But Abraham said to him, "Beware that you do not take my son back there." That's a sermon all in itself, but I'm not going to preach that this morning. "The Lord God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my family, and who spoke to me and swore to me, saying, to your descendants I will give this land. He will send his angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from there. And if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be released from this oath. Only do not take my son back there." Now the culmination of the story, or the finish of the story, starting in verse 59. "So they sent Rebekah," now that's the girl that the servant found and is bringing back to Isaac. "So they sent away Rebekah their sister and her nurse, and Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, 'Our sister, may you become the mother of thousands of 10,000s, and may your descendants possess the gates of those who hate them.' Then Rebekah and her maid arose, and they rode on the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rebekah and departed. Now Isaac came from the way of Beer-lahai-roi, for which he had dwelt in the south. And Isaac went out to meditate in the field in the evening, and he lifted up his eyes, and he looked, and there the camels were coming. Then Rebekah lifted her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from her camel, for she said unto the servant, 'Who is this man walking in the field to meet us?' And the servant said, 'It is my master.' So she took a veil and covered herself. And the servant told Rebekah all the things and the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Then Isaac brought Rebekah into his mother Sarah's tent. He took Rebekah, and she became his wife. He loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death." Now, Isaac was Sarah's only son. So it is only natural that he had a close relationship with his mother. I have seen many occasions over the years in which there was an only child, and it was a boy. And I have seen many occasions in which that boy seemed to have a closer relationship to his mother than he did to his father. That's where probably the term mama's boy comes from. I never have really considered that to be an indictment. Some do, some don't, I suppose. But if the father's off at work all the time and the mother's the only one that he interacts with because he has no siblings, and you know you can't be over at your neighbor's house playing all the time, then it's only natural that a boy can get close to his mother. And even if he does have siblings, it still is very, very normal and natural. So this was a close relationship, and the death of his mother was very hard. He was 37 years old. He was unmarried. He was 37 waiting till you were older to be married was nothing unusual back then, and it's really not that unusual now. People are actually waiting longer to get married now. That's become kind of in vogue again, as it were. When Sarah died, her influence on him was very, very apparent by his level of grieving. And then when this wife was brought for him, arranged marriages were very, very normal in the Middle East. When this wife was brought to him, he did not get her a new tent, but he took her to the tent that belonged to his mother. I believe that this tent had become symbolic. I believe that this tent had become a place in which when he fell and skinned his knee, his dad was off in the field with the flocks, and he would run to his mother as a little boy and say, well, I've hurt my knee, and she would doctor him. I believe that perhaps that when he was growing up, some of his father's servants' kids playing with him would get too rough or would bully him or would pick on him, and I can see him running to his mother Sarah's tent and getting comfort there again, and her saying, don't worry about it, I'll speak with them. And I can see over the years that this had become a place that to him was a place of comfort and was a place of consolation. So it was a happy place in his life, and it was a comfortable place, and it was a safe place. So when his new wife was brought to him, and it was time to consummate the marriage, and they were to become man and wife, then he took her to a place that he felt very comfortable with. I feel like that this was probably a very nice tent. Abraham loved Sarah. Abraham had lots and lots of money. And so I feel like that this tent was probably very luxuriously appointed. And so his desire was to give to his new wife all of the comforts that his mother had enjoyed in life as well. And he took her to this place of honor and treasured existence. God has given our mothers a very, very special place in our life. He has given our mothers the capacity to comfort. He has given our mothers the capacity to love. A woman is usually, now this is not the case in all women, but usually a woman is more emotionally sensitive to what is going on in her children's lives oftentimes than the father is. And oftentimes a mother's intuition. I know over the years that Michelle will get these feelings. Now I've gotten them too, and I've had dreams about our kids and different things. And but I would say probably her more than me usually has a read of what's going on. And when I title this message, and these crosses are symbolic because of the fact that the attributes that make a mother oftentimes are a comfort to others, are a blessing to others, but they are a cross to the mother. And we know what a cross is. A cross was a place of punishment. It was used in the Roman days to crucify criminals and murderers. But the cross to Christianity became a symbol of sacrifice. And Jesus himself said that if we were to follow him and be his disciples, that we would have to take up our cross and follow him. While a mother and her ability to comfort and her ability to love and her ability to make a beautiful home and the dishes of food that she cooks and the clothes that she mends and the tears that she dabs away, while on the receiving side, to us men and to us children, it is blessings and it is comfort and it is peace and it is love. To a mother, it is oftentimes a cross. Amen. Because of the responsibilities that she has to bear to take care of her family. Now we know about the Proverbs 31 woman. And that is a very, very normal scripture to use in a Mother's Day message. But I'm not using it today because I'm looking at the hardship of motherhood and not just the glory of it. The Proverbs 31 is a story by Solomon that speaks of all of the glorious attributes of a woman. Her being wise and her being respected and her having self-control. And that's kind of the pretty side of womanhood and the pretty side of motherhood. But I want you to also know that there is a side of motherhood that carries a cross, a side of pain, a side of suffering, a side of anguish. And it is that I want to speak of for just a few minutes. Now, from the realm of just the natural, it is important to understand that from the realm of just the natural, that motherhood in itself carries with it many responsibilities. The Bible says in 1 Peter 3, verse 5 and 6, that a woman, a wife, a mother, has to submit to her husband. Ephesians 5 says that she has to reverence her husband. Titus 2 and 4 says she has to love her husband. 1 Corinthians 14, 34 and 35 says she has to learn from her husband. And a lot of times what you're learning is how not to act. Somebody ought to say amen. Especially when he's throwing the potato chips at Nick Saban when somebody fumbled the ball. I cannot tell you the amount of times I fired Nick Saban last year. Anyhow, Michelle, she's in another room saying, Mark, calm down, it's just a game. Don't tell me it's a game, the money we're paying him. The Bible says that a woman has to be trustworthy. She has to have the love of her children, Titus 2 and 4. She has to be chaste, Titus 2 and 5. She needs to be a homemaker. So the responsibilities that a woman has right off the bat are big, and they're broad, and they're expansive, and we depend on them. And when we look towards the kitchen, we 9 times out of 10 expect to see a woman in there cooking. It's the way society is. Now, I know men cook, I cook. Michelle cooks. I cook more than Michelle cooked because of an agreement that we made a long, long time ago. I grew up cooking. My mother died when I was 12. My sister wasn't going to cook for me. My father worked 12 hours a day. So it was either I was going to cook or starve. So I taught myself to cook. I cooked my first pecan pie when I was 12 years old, and I've been cooking ever since. Michelle, she was class president, junior class president, senior class president, head cheerleader. She was never at home when she learned to cook. She's always at school. She ain't here today and talk about it like a dog. She ain't never going to know because ain't none of you going to tell her. But Michelle can cook great, and she is a wonderful cook, but we chose for her to have certain duties and me have certain duties, and it works out fine. And I'll be honest with you, 9 times out of 10, if it was up to me, the house would probably be condemned by the county. But she keeps the house spotless. She keeps the laundry washed. She keeps the floors. I mean, half the time I see her, she's got something in her hand cleaning. It's just her personality. She's a very neat person. And so she does these things, and we see our wives and our mothers do these things every day. They got a pot in their hand. They got a pan in their hand. They got a broom in their hand. They got a vacuum in their hand. They got Band-Aids in their hand trying to find some kid tracking blood through the house. And it's who they are. And it becomes natural because of the duties that have been assigned to them both by God and by tradition and by history. But mothers have other duties that can also make the cross very, very heavy. I want to tell a story this morning out of the Bible. I want to read it, and I want you to listen. And if you have your Bible and want to read along with me, it's the New King James Version, you're certainly welcome to. But I want to talk about a woman today, and I'm not going to be lengthy. and her name is Rizpah. And she was a Hebrew woman that lived in the Old Testament. I'm going to start in 2 Samuel, the 21st chapter, in verse 1. And it's going to take me just a few minutes to read the 14 verses, but I want you to listen, because this is one of the most powerful stories of a mother recorded not only in the Bible, but in human history. Now, there was a famine in the days of David for 3 years, year after year. And David inquired of the Lord, and the Lord answered and said, "It is because of Saul and his bloodthirsty house, because he killed the Gibeonites." Now, I want to stop right there and tell you what's going on there. When the children of Israel entered the land of Canaan, God had told them, kill everybody. Nobody lives, nobody survives. The Gibeonites from Ai were geographically situated a few villages away from Jericho, which was the first city that they took by conquest. It was the city held under the law of Haram. And the Gibeonites knew that they were going to be killed, so they sent ambassadors. They took clothes and shredded them and put dust on them. They took old wineskins that they'd thrown out and put them on their camels. And they came to Joshua and the children of Israel and said, "Hey, we live a long, long way off from here." Because God had forbidden Israel to make a peace treaty with anybody that would be in near vicinity to them, because he knew those people would be a snare to the children of Israel. So the Gibeonites, even though they were in that group of people that were supposed to be killed because they knew the law and they knew, what they had to do, they came and told them, said, "Make an allegiance with us, make a peace treaty with us. We'll pay you a tax and we will be your servants." And so they were fooled by that. Joshua was fooled by that. The elders were fooled by that. They thought they're a long way off, so God isn't going to mind us having a peace treaty with them. That was normal in the Middle East at those days. And of course, then they found out, no, they're right here in your own backyard. Well, Saul, wanting in his little twisted way of thinking to do what's right, since the Gibeonites had indeed been a snare to the children of Israel through their false gods, decided to kill them all. But see, to God Almighty, when you make a covenant, you make a covenant, and you do not break your word. And so he had allowed this plague of drought and famine to grip the land of Israel as punishment because of what Saul had done to the Gibeonites. Now let's get back in. Verse 2. So David sent and called the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not of the children of Israel, but were of the remnants of the Amorites, and the children of Israel had sworn protection to them. But Saul had sought to kill them in his zeal for the children of Israel and Judah. Therefore David said to the Gibeonites, "What shall I do for you, and what shall I do to make atonement, that you may bless the inheritance of the Lord?" And the Gibeonites said to him, "We will have no silver nor gold from Saul or his house, neither will you kill any man in Israel for us." So he said, "Whatever you say, then I'll do for you." Then they answered the king, "As for the man," speaking of Saul, "who consumed us and plotted against us, that we should be destroyed from remaining in any of the territories of Israel, let 7 men of his descendants be delivered to us, and we will hang them before the Lord in Gibeah of Saul, whom the Lord chose." And the king said, "I will give them." But the king spared Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, because of the Lord's oath that was between them, between David and Jonathan, the son of Saul. So the king took Armoni and Mephibosheth. This was another Mephibosheth, who were the 2 sons of Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, whom she bore to Saul. Rizpah was Saul's concubine. And he took the 5 sons of Merab, the daughter of Saul, whom she brought up for Adriel, the son of Barzillai, the Metholite. And he delivered these 7 into the hands of the Gibeonites, and they hanged them on the hill before God. So they all fell, all 7 together. They were put to death in the days of the harvest, in the first days, in the beginning of the barley harvest. Now Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, took sackcloth. Now listen to this story. And she spread it out for herself on the rock, because it was a hill and it was rocky. From the beginning of the harvest of barley, from the beginning of the harvest, until the late rains poured on them from heaven. That was 5 months. That was 5 months, because the barley harvest started in April, and the latter rain, or the harvest rains, did not come until September. So for 5 months, she did not allow the birds of the air to rest on them by day, nor the beasts of the field by night. And Aiah was told what Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, and David was told what Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, the concubine of Saul, had done. Then David went and took the bones of Saul and the bones of Jonathan his son from the men of Jabesh Gilead, who had stolen them from the streets of Beershan, where the Philistines had hung them, after the Philistines had struck down Saul in Gilboa. And he brought up the bones of Saul and the bones of Jonathan his son from there, and gathered the bones of those that had been hanged, the 7, and they buried the bones of Saul and Jonathan his son in the country of Benjamin and Zelah, in the tomb of Kish his father. Now, and from then on, God heeded the prayer of the land. Now, stick with me for just a few minutes and I'm going to close. I want you to get a picture here. I want you to get a picture of grief. I want you to get a picture of a woman who is broken with grief. Her 2 sons had done no wrong. Armani and Mephibosheth had done no wrong. They were the innocent victims of another man's sin. And her sons were taken from her on that day. Nothing prepared her for this. She raised them, little bitty boys growing up. She was there for those skint knees. She cooked those meals. She mended the clothes. She comforted them when they were bullied. She played with them in the yard. She joked with them at night. She read them stories and told them fables. And they grew up, and now they were strong young men, and she was so proud of them. Have you seen my boys? Oh, he's going to be a farmer. He's going to be a shepherd. He's going to be a merchant. And she was so proud of them. But in one fell swoop, sin took both of her boys in one fell swoop. And now they hung between heaven and earth on the top of a hill, having done no wrong. What did this mother do? What did she do? Did she go to a funeral and go to the wake, get comforted with all of her friends, and then go back home and say, well, you know, what's a mother to do? You know, it's tragedy has struck, horrible things happen, but what's a mother to do? I can't bring them back. No, she did exactly the opposite. She went to where her boys were hung. And she took sackcloth. Sackcloth was a symbol of mourning. And she laid the sackcloth on the rock, because like I said, it was a hill, it was rocky ground. And she stayed there in mourning, but also with a purpose for 5 months. I want to say something to the mothers here who have lost children. I want to say something to the spiritual mothers here who know lost children. A mother's cross is oftentimes the fact that she is called to put a vigil forth and to mourn for the lost sons and the lost daughters in their lives. A mother's cross is often the time in her life in which she has to go to those rocky places. And she has to go to those hard places. And she has to get down on her knees. And she has to mourn. And she has to weep. And she has to cry because of what evil has done to her children, or what evil has done to her spiritual children. The next thing that Rizpah did is that Rizpah did not just come and go, but she stayed from the beginning of harvest into the fall rains for 5 months. 5 months is more than just a show. She could have gone up there and brought a picnic lunch and put a little cloth out there, and her friends and mourners would stand off and say, oh, bless her heart, look at that love, look at that dedication. She could stay a couple of days, eat a couple of sandwiches, drink some water she had brought with her, cried and moaned for a couple of days, and that would have been normal, and that would have been a mother's love. And then she could have got up, went back home, and said, well, I guess I just got to move on. No, she didn't just make a show out of her grief. She didn't just make a show out of her mourning. What she did was commit herself. There is not a bird of the air, nor a beast of the field that is going to get to my children. I will stay here night and day. I will never leave. I will never walk away, because they are not getting to my children. Hers was not a show, but it was a commitment. If you have lost children today, mothers, if you have lost grandchildren today, mothers, there is one thing that I know. Somebody has got to pitch a vigil. And it's not something you can do in a day, and it's not something you can do in a week, but you're going to have to commit yourself to crying aloud and sparing not until the day those children are saved and come to God. The next thing that Rizpah did was she fought. Night and day. The Bible says she didn't let the birds rest on them by day, nor the beasts devour them at night. Birds by day, the scavengers that seek to feed off the dead. The beasts at night, the nocturnal animals that prowl and come in the dark unaware. Mothers and spiritual mothers are called by God to prepare a vigil of prayer and intercession against the spirits that seek to devour your lost children. Mothers of God that love their children, you can buy them gifts, you can give them clothes at Christmas, you can give them a new car if you've got the wherewithal, you can cook them their favorite cake, or make a tub of banana pudding that they can swim in. But the most important thing you'll ever do is, if they're lost and undone without God or His Son, is to pitch an unending vigil that says, I will not stop praying until my child is saved.
Good, Pastor.
Mothers and spiritual mothers have to keep a constant vigil against the spirits that seek to devour their saved and unsaved children. It is a dangerous job. It is an exhausting job. It is a frustrating job. But that job might be the only thing that keeps your child's soul out of hell. It was your prayer that cried aloud and spared not, that kept the hand of God from being lifted off of that child and the devil destroying them. It was your prayer, because you see, David found out what Rizpah had done. And when he found out what she had done, he went and had her sons' bodies taken down and had them buried in a tomb so that they couldn't be devoured. And that's when she left. When the bodies left, that's when she left. When the bodies were safe, that's when she left. When you pitch a vigil for your children and you spend your time in prayer and you take up that cross, you take up the cross of intercession, you take up the cross of mourning, you take up the cross of crying. But Pastor, I have cried so long over my children, and I have prayed so long for my children, and they'll do good for a while and then they'll fall back, and they'll do good for a while and they'll fall back, and I get so tired and I get so weary. I understand your pain. I understand your weariness. I know it is a thankless job, but if you don't do it, going to. If you don't cry aloud and spare not, who's going to? It may not be an easy cross to bear, and it may cost you more than you ever thought you had to pay. But if you'll just hold on to God, and if you'll just keep on praying, and keep on trying, and keep on toiling, then the day will come in which you will see your child walk an altar and live for God, and it will have been worth your vigil, the time that you spent in anguish carrying that cross for their salvation. My mother was a godly woman. I'm fixing to close. Brother Tim, praise Team, whoever you want up here, Tim, just bring whoever. My mother was a godly woman. I've told stories about her many, many times over the years. But the greatest thing that my mother did was to pray for me. I would hear her in the night when she would think I was asleep. She died of Lou Gehrig's disease when I was 12 years and 5 months old. But before she died, before Lou Gehrig's disease robbed her of her ability to speak, I would hear her as a child standing at the door of my room, interceding for me, praying for me. Before she died, she had hung a picture of a Jesus holding a little lamb. This little lamb was around his feet. She's holding a lamb. And about a year and a half, 2 years after she died, a young man looking, some of you know this story, some of you don't, a young man looking at my rifle, not realizing that I had left 2 bullets in it. It was a bolt action. You hunters know what that is. Not realizing that I had left 2 bullets. I forgot I left them in it. And he was standing probably from me to that keyboard right there, if not closer. And he pulled the trigger. The bullet hit my throat, came out my neck and the back. And the bullet exploded when it hit my throat. I still carry some of the lead in my body. But a chunk of the lead, when it came out of my back, it went right above the sheep's head that Jesus was holding. Went through the picture and embedded into the wall. And in my heart and in my life, I have always believed that that bullet didn't kill me that day. And that God let it hit that picture to remind me that there was a mother who had sowed many tears for my life and for my existence and for my safety. She knew she was dying. She knew she wasn't going to be there to take care of me. But that did not stop her from praying the prayers. And those prayers, you see, the Bible says in Revelations, are stored up in vials. And even after she was gone, the angels will still pouring my mother's prayers out before the throne room of God. And on that day, that bullet that should have killed me, the neurosurgeon that did my exploratory surgery said it missed your carotid artery by a shade of paint. And I believe firmly that the only reason I am at 59 years old standing behind this pulpit preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ today is because I had a praying mother. Would you please stand?